Aloha, folks, and welcome back to Degree Free. We are your hosts, Ryan and Hannah Mariyama. On this podcast, we share fundamentals we've discovered and the mistakes we've made while self-educating, getting work, building businesses, and making money. We'll tell you how to make it happen. No degree needed.
Welcome back, everybody, to the podcast. We, as always, are happy to have you here with us. And if you want to get more degree-free, because why would you not want more degree-free? You can go to degreefree.co/newsletter to get a free weekly newsletter that Ryan and I send out that has degree-free jobs, resources, stuff you can use to teach yourself, and just stuff that Ryan and I think is cool. So go ahead and sign up for that so you don't miss it.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's get into today's episode. Today, we are going to be doing the first in a series on what we call vocational creativity. And we've made an episode already kind of explaining what vocational creativity is in depth and why we think it's important and why if we all practice it a little bit more, we be able to expand what we thought was possible as far as what we could do for work.
Mm-hmm.
And so we'll put the first episode, the explainer episode, in the show notes for everybody. That'll be at degreefree.co/podcast. And you can just look up vocational creativity there. For a quick breakdown, if you don't want to go back and listen to that real fast, vocational creativity, it's kind of a superpower.
Yeah, it really is.
In identifying different vocations, work, jobs, whatever,
mm-hmm.
that you can do. Throughout our time of doing this, talking to people, coaching people, we found that one of the most limiting things for people in their careers is just not knowing what's out there.
And it's hard to, because there's so many things, but people don't even know how to figure out what those things are because we're taught such a narrow menu of career options in school.
Exactly. And so just quickly try to do this in 30 seconds or less. No, I'm not going to do it. I'll try to do this in 2 minutes or less.
Okay.
And whenever we ask people, think back to like being a kid or being a teenager, what do you want to do? There's a good chance that there's going to be same 10 to 20 jobs that they say, or what kind of jobs are out there even is a better question.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to be around the same amount of jobs. It's going to be doctor, lawyer, teacher, cop, fireman, vet.
And that's honestly, a lot of times people top out there.
Right. But I mean, like there's social work.
Yeah.
There's.
Yeah. That's usually when they learn a little bit later. Yeah.
Maybe.
Pilot sometimes.
Yeah. Pilot. Cowboy.
Oh yeah. Cowboy.
Those types
rock
of things.
Star.
Yeah. Rock star. YouTube star now.
YouTube star now.
Right.
Yeah. That one got added.
And what we're trying to do with vocational creativity is just trying to expand that horizon, basically. Just kind of expand that viewpoint, if that makes sense. Like,
yeah,
expand what's possible. So instead of it being like, if you're thinking about being in the airline industry and you want to work around planes, instead of thinking, oh, you only can be a pilot, maybe you would rather be a flight attendant. Maybe you would rather be a baggage thrower. Maybe you'd rather work air traffic control.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe
you want to be a buyer for planes.
Maybe you'd like to be a mechanic. There's so many other careers involved with that. And if we just expand our horizon a little bit more, it really opens up what else is out there in the world.
Yeah. And once you know what's out there, that's the first step. You can't do what you don't know exists.
Exactly.
And that's one of the biggest hurdles, I think, for people that are trying to figure out what they want to do for work, whether it's their first career choice or they're going back again now. And a lot of us are taught there's only one way to do things. And conveniently for colleges, a lot of the times it's a one-way paywall. It's a one-way street in, and you have to pay them $200 before you pass go.
It reminds me a lot of vocabulary. And there's that saying, I don't know who said it, or I'm going to mess this up. Somebody correct me. Contact at degreefree.co if you know what I'm talking about. And if I find it, I'll put it in the show notes for everybody. But there's that saying, like, your thoughts are limited to your words, basically, and or your thoughts are limited to your vocabulary.
Yeah.
And the amount of words that you
know.
Mm-hmm. And it's kind of similar in that vein.
Yeah, like if you don't know the titles of these jobs, or you don't know that they even exist, how are you supposed to know?
How are you supposed to aspire to them?
Right.
How are you supposed to,
even find them?
Exactly. How are you supposed to be like, yeah, that's what I want to do, if you don't know that they exist? Yeah. So anyway, that was way more than 2 minutes. Go back and listen to the episode and all the future episodes about vocational creativity.
Yeah, this is gonna be good. I think people are gonna like this series a lot.
So for the first episode, we are going to be talking about social work. And so if you're thinking about social work, possibly checking out these careers first. And that's not a diss on social work or the people that work in that field or anything like that. It's just a field that we see a lot, and a lot of people ask this very question. I'm thinking about going into social work, but what else can I do? Like, literally, that's the question that we get asked.
Yep. And this is the question, the fields that this gets asked about the most, the genres of work that this gets asked about the most are going to be teaching, social work, and medicine, because a lot of women buy more college degrees than men. And so I personally believe that women are targeted and taught to just go ahead and buy these degrees, and they're told this is the only way for you to work anywhere near what this is, and this is your passion, and you have to buy a degree, and this is the only path. And they do that because that's a really good way to sell product, right? Like, if I was trying to sell something, that seems pretty solid. So I think that that's where all this curiosity comes from. But we do get this question a lot. This one is one of the most common. Like, I'm going into social work. What else can I do? What else can I do other than get a degree in social work and then go work in social work? So we've compiled a list.
So one of the things with this whole vocational creativity thing, and when people ask these types of questions, that we have to do is we kind of have to break down, what are you really asking? Mm-hmm. Like, I'm thinking about going into social work. Are there any other alternatives to it? That's the question. That's a really, really, really broad question.
Super.
So the way that we've chosen to focus on, like, the points that we've chosen to focus on are going to be, on average, making more money than the median salary of a social worker.
With a graduate degree. I found the ones that we found for this. So this is the median salary of a social worker in the US is $48,000 with a graduate degree. That is not a bachelor's, which most of them just have a bachelor's. Most of them just have a bachelor's degree and have a worse outcome. So what we're doing here is these jobs make more than that. So
not only that, too, the second thing that we're going to be talking about is we're just making an assumption that if you're thinking about social work, you want to help people.
Yep.
And
you want to work with people.
These are two massive assumptions that we're not sure. It's going to vary for everybody.
Yeah, we have to start somewhere.
Right. But these are the two assumptions that we've made for this, vocational creativity exercise.
Yeah.
And just because we have, these ideas here doesn't mean we are limited to this. I mean, it's infinite. So we have 5 ideas here, and yeah, let's talk about them.
Yeah. So number 1 on this list is probably the closest, and that's going to be a mediator, like a legal mediator. This is a job that I don't think a lot of people know exists, and the reason I don't think a lot of people know it exists is because it's like, I mean, I don't actually know why people don't know why it exists, but I didn't know it existed until I was probably in my mid-20s, and I ran across someone who was a mediator. And what she was doing was she was actually working as a case manager, a social worker case manager before that. And she was working in family. I can't remember exactly. Like she was working with families that were going through, like domestic violence situations. And so she started working as a case manager. And so she was working as a case manager. And one of the lawyers on one of the sides that she was working with noticed that she was really good at working with the people. And so he asked her if she'd be interested in joining their firm as a mediator. And so that's actually how she became a mediator. And she was actually making $75K as a mediator, which was quite a bit more than she had been making as a case manager. And she really liked it. It was really interesting listening to her explain like sitting down and just how she goes about easing situations and getting people to resolve problems. And it was really cool. And she was really happy with her work. Like still worked with kids, still worked with families, still resolves complex family issues, and was able to get down into the nitty gritty and actually help people figure out their problems. So super cool job that to me seemed like a direct transition from her original job.
Yeah. And I'm not sure if we said it already, but the median salary for mediators is $49,000 a year.
Yeah. But this Reddit thread that I attached here, is somebody who is a mediator and explains, like a day in the life kind of a viewpoint, and other people commented on it as well. And it seems like a lot of them make more crowdsourced information given it's Reddit, but it seems like a lot of them make more than 49.
This is one of the things that we wanted to do for this episode because we talk about it a lot, and we talk about Reddit and we talk about like finding
context.
Yeah. Or just information, crowdsourced information. And, Quora, similar thing. Mm-hmm. And so for each one of these things, we are going to have a Reddit thread.
If it exists, we will find it.
Link to everything in the show notes for you guys, degreefree.co/podcast. Mm-hmm. And you can find it there. But yeah, in this Reddit thread. And so once again, we can't fact check people, but it is good, we think, to be able to see what other people do and the amount of money they make. And a lot of times, I mean, it could be totally fake. Totally.
Yeah, they could be making it up.
But there's something to a pseudonym on the internet. There's whatever, it's throwaway account 269420.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, what the hell?
Yeah.
But this person can say like, oh, I make $75K as a mediator, mm-hmm. doing this, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah.
The thing with mediator is that in some states, they do require a license, mm-hmm. and some states don't.
Yes, but none of them require a college degree. You can become a mediator, a licensed mediator without a college degree, even in the states that require a licensure.
Right. And that's the case with all of these jobs.
Yeah.
All of these jobs do not require college degrees.
Yeah, that's partially why we pick these two, is because these are all things that you can do without buying a degree at all.
Yeah, mediator, depending on the type of mediation that you do, it can be very similar to social work. But social work is also, just kind of going back to social work is kind of going back to defining our terms. It's very wide ranging.
Yeah, that's another thing I've noticed about people that say to a lot of people that ask this question, like, what can I do instead of social work? A lot of times they're currently in school or they're about to start college, right? So they don't actually know what social workers do, and it's just a really broad, and they don't even understand how broad it is, because a lot of them they start applying to jobs and then they realize they're not working with people. They're working in an admin role. They're working in an office doing paperwork, and that's what they do. And I think a lot of them, if they had known that was their job, they might have picked something else. Or
the exact opposite. If you like to do paperwork, but you want to know that the paperwork that you're filing is going towards a good cause and going towards helping somebody on the other side of that, for whatever it is that you mm-hmm. are doing, then maybe you would want to do that. Maybe you don't want us to talk to people.
Yeah.
And now this is a viable route for you.
Right. But
And
now
so-
you don't have to buy a degree to do it. Now that opens a whole other host of things you could do.
Right.
Right. You don't have to do it in this context.
I'm
for
more
that
talking
cost.
I'm more talking about just defining what social work is.
Yeah.
Like
It's hard because it's so broad and
there's a massive
yeah.
spectrum from working back of the office, back of the house, never just filing paperwork, permits, whatever it is that you're doing,
Yeah. Just keeping an
building
office running.
permits or whatever, and then
Like-
being a crisis manager,
Right.
and
On the
being-
street.
right? Exactly.
Yeah.
Being out in the field and whatever, like doing that.
Like
Those are
there's so much
between
here.
that and that's all social work.
Yeah.
But we've got to go some sort of direction with this.
Right.
So the second career job is going to be funeral director. And the median salary for funeral director is $58,000 a year. $58,000 a year.
Yep. I actually have a story about this one too. This was a long time ago, but I was on the podcast with these two really cool chicks that were morticians, actually, which is another interesting job that you don't always need a degree for. That's a whole nother thing though. That's more of like a science, that's a different.
I remember this. If we can find that podcast, we'll link to it in the show notes.
Yeah, shoot, forget the name
for everybody. And I think I remember two dead girls talking, something like that.
Yes, two dead girls talking. Super cool chicks.
And so we'll link to it in the show notes. It's completely not relevant to what we do now, but if you guys wanted to figure out what we did in our previous life and what we did for our previous business.
Yeah, when we owned a tattoo shop.
Right. Yeah, you can go ahead and listen to that.
Yeah, but they were super cool, and they were talking about the fact that we did talk about college actually at one point in the podcast, and their take on it was pretty interesting too. But they talked about how much they actually enjoyed their work and how they worked. They were actually working at a trade school too, so they were doing like hands-on training for people. But they also mentioned the fact that they thought they felt really fulfilled in their work and they really liked it, because death is a hard thing, right? Death is it's a hard thing. It's a final thing, and it's a common experience. Everyone will encounter it at some point. And the people who are there working alongside you as you go through that can make a real impact on your experience with someone's death. And so, and actually that's mirrored in Reddit, which a lot of the people in this Reddit thread that's linked below, that's going to be linked in the show notes about this, they say the same thing. The fact that they're able to facilitate, peace and calm and make sure that these people have some sort of closure and organization to a really stressful time, it gives them a lot of joy, and that's super cool. A college degree is not a requirement, though you may need specified training depending on who's hiring you. It seemed like when I looked into this, a lot of places will train you.
And I had a friend that was a funeral director. We were both working a job, and his previous job was a funeral director. And as far as the training goes, it really depends also on what type of funeral home it is, and I think the biggest difference with most things is big or small.
Yeah.
Big or small.
Yeah.
And so if you're just running like a very small funeral home that, maybe does a funeral, maybe one a week, maybe that's a lot. I don't know. But you know what I mean? One a month or something like that. Like that's different. I mean, you're probably not making $58,000 if it's one a month.
Probably not.
But you know what I'm saying? Like the training is going to be different. And
versus you're coordinating 5 a day.
Right, exactly. I'm thinking of some bigger funeral homes that I've seen, and
that's a lot of work.
Right, and there's like 3 different venues in this one
I didn't think about that.
Funeral home, and then they have like a 2:00, and they try to stagger them because parking,
Yeah.
At least from the ones that I'm thinking of. And so like they have a 2 o'clock, they got a 12 o'clock, and they got a 5.
Yeah. And then they're all going to be different too, right? You might have a burial versus an internment of ashes versus a, what
exactly.
have you.
But then that's all different because that's depending on, you're absolutely right.
Yeah. Interesting stuff though. Because you don't think about that, but everybody's going to encounter, everyone's going to need a funeral at some point, right? Something like that. And so that was just something that I was like, oh, this is an interesting, for someone who really wants to work with people in tough times. That's a really good one. That's a really good one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so the third job career instead of social work is a 911 dispatcher.
I felt like this fell under social work because it reminds me of, there are people who are drawn into social work because they want to work with people in crisis. And I'm like, well, a 911 dispatcher is that's kind of what that is,
Yeah. And the median salary for that is $48,000 a year.
And then obviously this one is a really important job. It kind of goes without saying that this is a really important job. If you call 911 and no one answers the phone, that would be really concerning, because who is going to help in case of an emergency, right? What's cool about this too, that I think is kind of, that's different from the others, is that this one's shift work. So you can kind of, you have a little more control. I mean, as you move up, I'd imagine you have a little more control over your life. So you might be able to work night shifts. You might be able to work day shifts. You can work part-time.
Control as far as the shifts that you're working.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
Because 911 dispatchers need to be on the clock 24/7.
Right.
Right. There's somebody working all the time. And so depending on your township, depending on however your dispatchers work, 8-hour shift, 8-hour shift, 8-hour shift, right? You could work the A shift, the B shift, or the C shift, or however,
Yeah, Ryan knows a lot more about this than me, but it's cool. It's a cool job. Can be stressful, definitely, because you're dealing with crisis. But if that's something that you want to do, like if you want to resolve, if you want to help, you want a hand in resolving crisis, great job.
Yeah. And so with the 911 dispatchers, it really depends on, the thing that we have to be careful here is some cities, townships, they only hire, like say you want to be, and this is usually in bigger cities, but
More controlled.
say you want to be a police dispatcher. So let me back up all the way to the beginning.
Okay.
All the way to the beginning, real fast. So 911 dispatchers, just because I have...
We're gonna ask our resident first responder.
Yeah, so 911 dispatchers, there's a couple of different flavors. And you have, for usually smaller towns, they have exactly what that is, 911 dispatcher. When they say 911, like, what is your emergency? And some of them may not give you like an option, right? I mean, most of them, all of them do, but there's dispatchers there that are trained to dispatch fire, police, EMS, and then lifeguards if you're around oceans or lakes or whatever. But if you're, usually speaking, if you're in a bigger city, they have police dispatchers, they have fire dispatchers, they have EMS dispatchers, and then if you're around a body of water, they have lifeguard dispatchers.
Do you know if if there's a mental health hotline or crisis hotline for the city, does that go through police, or is that its own wing of dispatchers?
Usually, if it's for the city, usually those are different. Those are going to be social workers, right? Like those are going to be exactly social workers.
Oh,
right. I mean, it's still a crisis and it needs to be dealt with, but then they're going to usually dispatch a crisis social worker.
They're niching it down, basically.
Right, exactly. That's somebody that's more equipped at conflict resolution when it's more like interior. Like not interior, that's weird. But
Internal.
Yeah. Interior, like your house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interior conflict resolution.
Yeah.
Well, that's a different kind of.
Yeah, that's a different kind of resolution.
I hate this shag carpet.
So also what I wanted to say about that is that some places also require their dispatchers to also be whatever they're dispatching. So not a lot of places do this, but some places do. Where if you are a fire dispatcher, every fire dispatcher that you talk to in that city, county, whatever, they are firemen.
Oh.
They went through the fire academy. They got their certs.
Or they're cops.
Right. And if you call a cop, they're cops.
Oh.
They went through and they went to the police academy. They went through their training. They did their stint, and now a couple years later or whatever, they rotated into their dispatcher role.
Interesting.
So with this specifically, you're going to want to pay attention to your county, your city, your township, wherever it is that you are, and figure out how your dispatchers work. Most places in the country, the dispatchers are not.
They're just dispatchers.
Right. The most places in the country, they are not first responders. They because there's two different skill sets.
You don't need them to be.
Right, exactly. You don't need to.
And it shrinks your pool of candidates too.
Exactly. It shrinks your pool of candidates and everything like that. In certain situations, I can see how, maybe in the beginning, especially, I can see the argument, and I'm going on a tangent here. Sorry, guys. I can see the argument for like a fireman becoming a fire dispatcher. And in the beginning, you're probably going to be pretty good at it. I mean, you're going to be better at it. I mean, as long as you have radio presence.
More specific, yeah.
Like you have radio presence.
You know what questions
right?
to ask.
You know exactly, but there's a checklist.
Yeah.
There's a checklist of questions.
Yeah.
So that's not that big. That's not that big of a deal, but you're pretty much cool, calm, and collected.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, you're used to communicating with the public.
Yeah.
And then for the most part, you're able to kind of put yourself in their shoes and be like, okay, this is what you have to do, and walk them through it. Like I said, it's being a dispatcher in many ways. It's kind of like being a pilot. Like there's a checklist for you to do. Like you run through like, here's what you do, especially in fires. Like, I'm just going down that road because I know that well.
Sure.
And so, like, can smoke, flames. Can you get out? No, you can't. Okay. Is there, are there windows? No, there isn't. Go into the bathroom. Can you climb out a window? No. Okay. Well, close the door.
Yeah.
Wet a towel. Put it in a thing. Right. Where are you? That type of stuff. Like there's a list of questions you need to ask.
Sure.
But anyway, so before you say you want to be a 911 dispatcher, just make sure that you look at whatever local,
because in cities it might be different. Right,
local authorities,
it's probably big cities,
how they handle it.
Yeah.
To be very honest, it's a lot of it is unions.
I was going to say it's going to be the union probably saving those jobs for firefighters who can't be firefighting for whatever reason.
A lot of it is unions.
Yeah.
I mean,
so once you
I don't want to get into it, but
yeah, once you get out of a city where there's a union, probably those jobs are separate.
Yeah.
It's more likely to be separate.
I'm not, what I mean by I don't want to get into it. I mean, I don't.
Yeah, it's just the way it is.
Just the way it is. Yeah. There's no right or wrong. You know what I mean? There's no right or wrong about it. Just the way it is.
Just is.
Yeah. And so a college degree is not required for those, though training definitely will be. And so just to kind of talk about, when you're a fireman for the Honolulu Fire Department and you go to FCC, the Fire Communication Center, I think you still, even though you're a trained fireman, to learn the dispatching system, to learn your, the questions to ask and run through, I think it's still 6 months.
Oh, wow.
Maybe.
You got to train.
Something like that. Yeah.
Makes sense, though.
And the next job career, instead of social work, that we could look at is a paralegal.
Yeah. People don't think about this one. understandably so, because it seems like it'd be separate, but it's kind of there's a lot of overlap with a lot of what most, I would say that most your average social worker does.
And so before we get into it, paralegals, the median salary is $56,000 a year.
Mm-hmm. And you can definitely make more than that for sure.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. There's some highly paid paralegals. It's kind of crazy actually. And so there's a lot of flavors of paralegal. So you can work, you can kind of pick, and this is where it gets kind of cool because it's similar to social work in that you could pick a concern that you care about, right? So you could work for personal injury, medical malpractice if you wanted to, immigration law. You could work for family court, bankruptcy, divorce. It doesn't matter. There's so many different types of law that you could just look for that specific type of law firm and then just do that type, try to do that type of work. Environmental, like you can literally, nonprofit, there's just literally so much, there's so many laws. There's so many law firms. And if there's a specific thing that you care about, specific issue, specific cause that you care about legally, and you want to have an impact working in that, this is a fantastic way to do that.
Yeah, definitely. And one thing about the paralegal, it's very similar to social work in what you said, to the point of what you said about the flavors and the different types. Paralegals also, there are a lot of different types of paralegals, and kind of similar to the funeral director, it's kind of predicated on how big your firm is and what your that will dictate usually what your responsibilities are. And so what I mean by that is, so yes, all those different types of law, but then in a small firm versus a big firm, in a small firm, you might be the one-stop shop for everything. Like it might just be the attorney and you. And the attorney files the paperwork, and whatever he has to do, he goes and litigates and whatever he or she does. And you do everything else.
Yeah.
And so that could be like a hybrid between being an executive assistant to being a receptionist to, working at a call center.
To
and then
kind of being a mini lawyer.
And then also doing the role of a paralegal and, looking up what they need and
analysis, documentation, communication, organization.
And then when you go to bigger places, just like most other thing,
your role gets more specific.
Right, exactly.
Because there's more people.
And so you might not need to wear all those hats because there's more people. And now all you do is you look up this one specific thing. Like say if you're in like litigation or something and the attorneys, the partners are thinking about, this creative, defense or this creative pursuit. I don't know what I'm a little on my depth here, but follow me.
We're not lawyers.
Yeah, exactly. Obviously. But if they say, I need help in finding some sort of legal precedence for this, or I need help in documenting this or whatever.
Or I need you to talk to the such and such and find out such and such.
But it's all back of the house stuff, and you never do forward facing client work.
You're doing research and analysis.
Right. Exactly.
But yeah, definitely a super interesting field of work if you especially if you like to find stuff and organize stuff and you have that inclination. And especially if you're able to pick a type of law to work in, you can work in a type of law that you care about, because you're going to learn a lot about the intricacies and the inner workings of it. And that to me is a super cool value proposition for working in that space. Like if you cared about a certain type of law, that's a really cool way to get involved. And also you just never really know what kind of opportunity that's going to bring you. I feel like especially if you're good at it. But yeah, there's a Reddit thread that's going to be linked in the show notes for a paralegal who talks about their experience working as a personal injury paralegal. Interesting stuff. And then it should be noted a college degree is not required to be a paralegal. at all.
Yeah.
But analytical skills, administrative skills, and communication skills are going to be highly valued. So anybody that's decent at those things, good to go.
And the last career job that we are thinking about is applying at a nonprofit. And this is kind of like a roll my eyes, like.
But it needs to be said, a lot of people think they can't apply to a nonprofit unless they have a college degree.
Right. It's kind of what I meant by roll my eyes is like, it's just it's like a cop out of a blanket statement, like really, but it is.
Yeah.
But I did want to say before we get into the nonprofit side of it, or before we get further down this road, is that a lot of people think that like nonprofits are the only way to go in order to like do any sort of quote unquote charitable work or any like giving back.
Mm-hmm.
There are companies that you could consider working for that do have like charitable arms to their business, right?
Yes.
Like think of like Tom's, right?
Mm-hmm.
Blake Mycoskie, like
right.
what it was that he like pretty much started it, right? Like the buy one get one,
Mm-hmm.
like buy one give one.
Yes.
Shoes. Tom's.
But
we'll link if you guys. I mean, everybody knows Tom's, but we'll link.
What's it called again? Conscious capitalism, ethical capitalism,
Something like that. Yeah.
Generous capitalism. I forget the. I forget
we'll
the title.
We'll look it up and put it in the show notes.
Yes.
But there are those different types of
altruistic capitalism
that do have a charitable aspect to their business.
Yeah, either they have a charitable aspect to their business or they have a formal nonprofit wing attached to their business.
Right.
Sometimes.
True. And so that's kind of a blanket statement, or I wanted to put that in there to kind of be considered in this quote unquote nonprofit, even though it might be a for-profit company, but they do, good works.
Mm-hmm.
And for nonprofits, for any company, I mean, if you've been listening long enough, you don't need a degree.
No, just go apply.
Just apply.
You want to work at a museum? Just go apply at it. You want to work at the Red Cross? Just go apply over there. Like you want to work at the
blood bank.
Yeah, go. You want to work at a local food bank? Go apply there. You want to work at a homeless shelter? Go apply. Just go see what
that goes back to. Even if their job descriptions do say college degree required.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Just apply. Apply fearlessly.
Yeah.
Just apply anyways.
Yeah. That is not something that is not something where I'm not saying that you won't get eliminated sometimes from those jobs if you don't have those things, but to be perfectly honest, nonprofits of all things, I feel like should really just be assessing people based on their individual characteristics. That's like, you should really just be talking to people and figuring out if they're a good fit, for sure. And a lot of them do. So, yeah.
And so that's kind of a cop out. So with nonprofits, we did want to say it like, if you're not sure about social work, but you want to do help and one of these other 4 things that we already talked about, and you like doesn't strike your fancy and you can't think of anything else, this could be a way of kind of dipping your toe in the water. And this could be a very low risk way of figuring out whether or not you want to do this type of work. And
also great experience to show on a resume if you're going to try to shoot up higher later. But also nonprofits historically, and most people know this, but a lot of nonprofits don't pay well. And if you have student debt, it's going to be a lot harder for you to comfortably take that risk or take those jobs. So you're going to want to apply and work at a nonprofit without the student debt. Just go work there and gain experience, as opposed to first, let's go spend 5.5 years in college, go into debt, and then realize that it pays $36K to work at a nonprofit. Instead, just skip over that whole part and just go make $36K at a nonprofit, gain experience, and then try to apply at different ones, or try to work your way up at that one if you like working there. Yeah, can be done, often is done, and definitely something to note. There's not one path to do this. You do not have to buy a degree to work at a nonprofit or work in social work.
Yeah, definitely. And that's pretty much it for this episode. Like I said before, links to everything is going to be in our show notes. degreefree.co/podcast. And you can find links to everything that we talked about there.
And if you want to get more degree free, which of course you do, then go on over to degreefree.co/newsletter to sign up, and you will get a weekly email from Ryan and I, jobs, resources, podcast information, and all kinds of cool stuff that you're not going to want to miss.
Yeah, definitely. And if you guys wanted to support the podcast, the best way that you could do that is by leaving an honest review wherever it is that you get your podcasts and sharing this with a friend. All right. Until next time, guys. Aloha.